Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. I've spent a number of times going back to my hometown. And for those who don't know me or haven't catched my very, very first episode 000, where I talk about my history. I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, about 4 hours north of Green Bay, in a wonderful little town called Houghton, Michigan. And so I've been getting there back quite often. My father's getting up in years. And I run into people that I know from high school. And I think about my existence. And I was fortunate enough that I got recruited, such as it was, to go play college football. And that was kind of the little nudge that I needed to get out of there, because if that didn't happen, I don't know that I ever would have left. And it's just, part of it's, I'm somewhat of an introvert. Part of it, and maybe this is all part of it, very comfortable in that surrounding. And I see people up there and they have a wonderful life, for the most part, but I wonder if they sit and wonder about, hey, what would happen? What would my life have been if I hadn't been there? Or if I hadn't stayed, if I'd gone on and done something else. And, it's really kind of got me thinking about just the courage it took to leave and once to go play college football and get a degree, and then leaving again to go off to law school. And those were both very, very scary moments for me. I won't get into all the tears and all the drama around leaving home. But today we're going to have a conversation around fears and the fears we have and the fears and how they impact our relationships and our moving out of those comfort zones. I have with me today Jacqueline Wales. She's a coach and trusted advisor that helps clients achieve remarkable results by helping them understand being fearless and that fearlessness, as she'll say, is not the absence of fear, but basically having the courage just to take that next step, to be open and curious about the change. She's the author of a couple of books, The Fearless Factor, and then she has a follow-up to that called The Fearless Factor at Work, and then also has a nonfiction or a novel, some pseudo novel, I should say. I'll let her clarify. When the Crow Sings, which is a story about her grandmother's journey, her mother's journey, and her journey, being parents to being unwed mothers. And got a lot going on. Jacqueline, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you making time to be on the program with us.
It's my pleasure to be here, Frank. Thanks for inviting me in. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess before we jump in, give us a little bit of background on how you got into this, and then let's start talking about being fearless.
So fear is pretty, normal in many ways. It's an emotion. And I was introduced to it at a very early age with a father who was alcoholic and growing up in poverty in the small seaport town of Leith, which is the port of Edinburgh, Scotland. And I was 16 years old when I decided that I needed to get the hell out of Dodge. Because there was no way in hell that I was going to be, happy where I was and continuing again with the family saga. So I left home at 16, went to London, and immediately fell in with the wrong kind of people, shall we say. And within a very short space of time, found myself pregnant. And, I went to London with very little money, with no job, with nothing to really support me, and I had to go figure that one out toot sweet. So talk about fears. There was an enormous amount of fear there, but the being in fear The option to get beyond it was much more of a draw than it was to stay in it. But of course, it led to a lot of drugs and alcohol, and it led to a lot of behaviors that really were not serving. So I gave my first child up for adoption when I was 20 years old. I got married to the first person who said he loved me. And then, of course, that didn't work out. And I had another child with him. That child was left with his father when he was 3.5 years old. And I moved from London to San Francisco, again, knowing nobody. Didn't know what the hell I was going to be doing there, but thought maybe I would go to Australia and try to become something in Australia.
Right.
Carrying a lot of baggage. So there's a lot of story here. But the point being is that fear was always at my heels. I was always aware that I was pushing into something I didn't know, and I didn't know if I would survive. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s when I had met my husband by then, and we've been together for 43 years. So talk about making it work.
Yep.
And we got our first child. And then it was a case of, I have to get myself together in order to provide for this child and not walk out on her. So that became the saga. And it was really a long journey. And it was a big piece of my life to figure that one out. Right. I inherited a stepdaughter at the age of 10 from Thailand, a complete stranger. And I had the fear of how I was going to handle that. And I managed to do something with it. So there's been, a lot of different steps along the way that allowed me to understand that fear really interferes with your life in major ways until you're willing to show up and say, no more, I will do something about this. And it was hard. It was really hard. You had to really face the demons, get into the darkness. When one friend said to me at one point, why do you have to go there? It seems like it's really painful. I was like, yes, it is. But if I don't go there, I'll die. And I wasn't going to die. And that was it. Yeah.
I think about these sorts of things quite a bit from a professional networking standpoint. People tell me, well, I don't have time to go to events. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to meet with these people. And people will tell me when I get out and do programs that they don't like to go to events and they don't like to talk to strangers, make small talk. And I tell people it's all very natural, as you've kind of indicated. Fear is a natural thing because for thousands and thousands of years, we were born into tribes or clans and never saw anybody else outside of that. And if you saw a stranger, it generally wasn't a good thing. And so we have this deep programming in our DNA or somewhere, I don't know. So we certainly come upon it naturally. I guess probably the burning question is, how do you push past it? How do you?
So you just mentioned the distrust of the other, and that's really what it comes down to. In our DNAs, when someone's outside of our tribe, then, we have to question who they are and what they are. Why do you think we have so much division in this country right now? It is pretty remarkable. But in order for you to get comfortable in that conversation with another person, you have to make it not about you. You have to make it about the other person. You're curious. You want to find out more. You want to get some information. So, for instance, the big mistake many people presume when they get into networking is, I'm going to tell you all about me, and I'm going to tell you all about how much I've done and what I'm looking for and so forth. The answer is no. You start with, tell me who you are.
Yeah.
Tell me more so that I can get to know you. I mean, one of the greatest networking questions I was ever given was, what's your greatest challenge in business or in life? And what would you think you would like to have help on? Now, if you ask someone that, they frequently take a step back. You mean you're offering to help me and you don't know anything about me? Well, I'm trying to find out. So I think that becomes the way in which we enter the conversation. And whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, it's always going to be about, let me find out about you. Yeah. And then if you're curious, maybe you'll come back with some questions for me. Now, this brings up a vulnerability. We talked about that briefly before the show began today. But this vulnerability of revealing who you are is problematic for a lot of people because their self-worth, their self-identification may not be real, frankly. There's all kinds of stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we do and what we're capable of. So busting these myths is really the big piece of work. Certainly the work that I do as a coach and leadership behavioralist, but it is a piece to understand. So when people withdraw, when people say, I'm too busy, or oh, I don't have time for that, or networking is so shallow. I mean, it's really all about, me. Well, let's reverse that. And let's think of it in terms of, no, let's get curious. Don't you want to know who's in your world? Don't you want to know what it is that people are doing? And how can you help them? Because service, above everything else, is the greatest thing that one can possibly offer to another human being. Be of service.
Yeah, no, I all this resonates with me. It's what you're basically speaking to is getting people to change their expectations as to what these things are about, what these encounters are about. I'm introverted. Give me a Friday night at the movies all by myself. I'm happy. I love my wife, but I like my alone time. It's just, that's who I am. But, people will look at me and say, you can't be introverted. You seem so comfortable out with people, with strangers.
Well, you could be an ambivert. There's another designation here.
No, I get it. I get it. But nonetheless, yeah.
Yeah, but the point being about that is, and I can certainly understand that completely. If I'm with people all day, I just want to go and close the door and turn on the TV and call it quits.
That's my life, right? I'm constantly on. I mean, it's this afternoon. It's well, you're in San Francisco. It's still almost morning there, but it's like one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and it's interacting with people is hard work.
This is very important to understand. Interacting with people is hard work because you've got to remain open to the conversation. If you already come with preconceived notions about what it's all going to be and how it's going to go and so forth, you're setting yourself up for failure, frankly. But if you enter it with an open mind and you're really there just to find out, again, that curiosity, no judgment, just simply trying to figure it out. And we all know that, especially as entrepreneurs, if I'm not networking, if I'm not sharing what I'm doing and making myself visible to the world, then my business is going to remain very small or non-existent. And we need to build allies. And that's another big piece of the networking conversation. Who are your allies? And I talk about this in my Transformational Strategies program, about how do you build your allies? Where do you look for them? And that is a really critical piece of why we're out there networking. Otherwise, it's just a whole lot of yada, yada. And at the end of the day, what did you do with your day today? Well, I talked to a lot of people. So where did that go? Well, it was nice. They were nice. Yeah. But no, you have to think of it in terms of strategically building your alliances, building your power base, because without each other, it brings us to the issue of relationships. We humans need relationships, whether they're with our spouses or partners or whatever, business partners. We need relationships. That is the air we breathe. Can't live in isolation. We're not meant to live in isolation. And there's a lot of research done on that too. So you can see it, there's a whole thing with monkeys that was a few years ago. When it's deprived of a relationship, we wither and die. We need relationships to grow. Very simple.
Well, that's why solitary confinement is such a punishment.
Yes, and I read a story just the other day in the New York Times of a man who was 43 years in solitary confinement. And he taught someone how to read by sounding things out through the cement wall. Now, that is pretty remarkable. And after 43 years of being in solitary confinement, do you think that man had a hard time adjusting to the world outside? Hell yeah. He just wanted to go in a room and close the door. And I'll talk to anybody. But we don't have that. Have been conditioned to build relationships. We've been conditioned to need the connection to other people. And when we're deprived of that, it leads to some pretty serious problems, in my opinion. But keeping that in mind, when we're getting back to the idea of why are you networking? Why are you out there networking? Well, you've clearly got something to say. You've clearly got a service or a product that you feel the world should know about.
Right.
So get more comfortable talking about it. How many people kind of mumble their way through? What do you do? Yeah, well, okay. How about we just say out loud, this is what I do and I think it's great. And I'd love the world to know about it. And it's not about ego and me, by the way, which is another reason why people shut up. It's like, well, that's all ego. Well, you need a certain amount of ego in order to promote whatever you're doing and whoever you are. But at the same time, know again, how am I being of service to others? That is really the key point to any kind of professional networking situation that you and I are acquainted with.
Right. Right. Well, let's switch gears here for a second. I want you to have the opportunity to kind of talk about your Transformational Strategies program, how people can get a hold of you. That would be awesome. Just this is fascinating. I'm sure people would have an interest.
Well, thank you for that, Frank. I appreciate it. Transformational Strategies for Success came out of 12 years of me offering workshops, retreats, and so forth. It also came out of a lifetime of experiences of my own understanding what are the things that drive us. So we look at three things in transformational strategies. Who are you? Where do you want to go? And most importantly, what is it that's getting in the way? And I take people on a really deep dive into holding the mirror up to themselves by asking really good questions. Because people say, I'm looking for answers. And I go, you're looking for good questions. So I give them 77 activity sheets with good questions on them. And they're all designed to get people to understand that they can be changing their lives by being more reflective. It's a very self-reflective program. It's also self-directed, supported by one-on-one coaching and mastermind groups. So it's all about accountability too. You've got to have that built in. So we just did a pilot of it. There were 16 people on board, and the breakthroughs that are happening in less than 3 months is amazing. And I knew it worked, but I wanted people to tell me. So social proof, again, very important piece, as you know. So Transformational Strategies is designed to get you in the fastest way possible to understand who you are, where you want to go, and what's getting in the way. So we'll look at fear. We look at what are you willing to change. We look at setting the path for your purpose, your meaning, your goals, your actions. We'll look at your communication skills. We also look at building your alliances, building your network, your entourage, as I like to call it. And we'll look at where are the fears of failure and the attitude necessary to build it. And it's built into several sections. So it's not shallow, because I like to say I don't do shallow, I only do deep. So for those who are really committed to their own personal growth, who've done some of this work previously, this program is designed to get you where you want to go, where you think you want to go, and get out your own way. That's the important part, because we're all good at getting our own way.
I guess quick questions. I heard one-on-one and group. Do people go through like in flights, almost like, hey, here's a semester of college, or can people start at any point and then just?
It starts with, we have 11 strategies. So
Okay.
You start on strategy 1, and that one is going to deal with fear. And we're going to look at where that fear is interfering with your life. And then you will move through it sequentially from 1 to 11. And then in between, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of homework to be done, as well as things online that get you thinking more deeply. It's very interactive, which is very unusual for a normal so-called coaching program. So I really want to take people on a journey a transformational journey that will, at the end of it, you will have some real understanding of how confident you can be, how you can really start to think about where you get in your own way with negative thinking, and what is the real purpose of your existence. That is a serious question that a lot of people don't stop to ask themselves. And so then if you know what your purpose is, and you've set this understanding, the meaning that we all need in our lives, then you start to set some action goals, and you start to take that action as you go through this program. So, and the accountability piece with coaching and mastermind is there simply to keep you on track. And this is a 6-month program. The folks that have just done it have done it in 3 months, but I'm giving people a lot of time to really think about this stuff. So 6 months from the start to the finish of the program, people really are feeling like a different person. And that is phenomenal. Yeah.
What would be the best way for somebody to get a hold of you?
So Jacqueline at JacquelineWales.com. Very simple. You can also find the information on my website at JacquelineWales.com. And there's a whole lot more there to see too. We've got lots of videos and other things. If you want to spend on my website, it'll keep you occupied for a while.
Okay. I'll definitely get that in the show notes. So I appreciate your time here today.
It's been fabulous. Thank you, Frank, for having this conversation with me. I loved it.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.